Episode number 319 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. My guest today is Shay Bart Andrione. Shay was raised in Queens, New York, but moved out west to California. She's a writer of numerous plays, essays, and maintains a blog called Twig Hugger. Shay has written multiple articles for mom and parent-oriented platforms, The Next Family, Mother Figure, LA Parent, Your Teen Magazine, and Chicken Soup for the Soul. Carry On is her first book, and it's about true stories of the heartbreak and wonder of trying to start a family. And Shay hopes that this will bring comfort to many others who are going through the fertility journey. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Welcome to the podcast, Shay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you. And I would love for you to share your story and what got you inspired to write your book, Carry On. Would love for you to share that with the listeners.
I would love to. So I always loved kids. I always wanted a younger sibling. I wanted to babysit when my parents decided they were never going to have another child. I'm the youngest with a big age gap. So I took on all things that could keep me around kids so that I felt like I could be a big sister or I babysat. And I taught kids and ran day camps and stuff like that. So I always knew that I wanted to be a parent and start a family. So when I did finally find the person to do that with, I thought, okay, well, when we get to that moment, it's just going to be easy peasy. And, you know, that's so exciting. We make the decision and we go. And of course, like every listener of your podcast and many, many more people around the world, it doesn't always work that way. So it took me quite a bit of time to figure out what to do. You're instructed pretty quickly to try for longer. And I think I knew something was going to stop me unless I got help, but I did see my regular OB at the time, and she suggested that we do an HSG, where they flush the iodine up your fallopian tubes. And she discovered
Not a fun test.
Oh, so fun. Yeah. You can really feel that. Like,
yeah, it's crazy, but I hear so many things, so many stories, and I just wish doctors would just let people know like what's coming.
Yeah, like exactly what you're going to feel.
Yeah.
No, we have to experience it for ourselves. So that resulted in finding out that I had a fibroid right at the opening of my uterus. So I had scheduled a surgery to get it removed, and somehow in that, well, not somehow, we know how making babies can work. I guess my husband and I were continuing to try, and because of the HSG, it pushed the fibroid a little bit out of the way, and I was able to actually conceive. But the fibroid and the pregnancy, they were fighting for the blood supply.
So just backing up, were you about to do surgery for it, but then you stopped because you got pregnant?
Yeah. So I scheduled a surgery and then ended up in crazy, crazy pain. And like pain I'd never experienced before, like just shocking, like sharp pain. And I ended up calling the doctor and she said, go to the emergency room. And it was in the emergency room that I found out I was actually pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And I was told basically you got to just kind of deal with this because they didn't know which one would win out.
Got it.
So I waited and I could, I took whatever I could for pain, but not a lot because I was like, well, I think I had a feeling like, no, I'm pregnant. Like, this is amazing.
Oh, wow. You
Like,
felt it before they confirmed it?
no. I definitely didn't know when I
Okay.
went in. But once I was very protective. I was
Yeah.
like, no, I don't, you can tell me all you want that like, there's a chance this won't stick, but I'm going to protect this.
Yeah. For sure.
So I was very, very careful. And then in the end, that doctor was really not helpful. And I had like crazy pain on the following Monday and ended up like my sister-in-law said, just go to my doctor, just go to my doctor. So I went to her doctor and I had a very like strong, clear line in the sand that I would not go to a male doctor. And I felt like at that point, I was like, okay, like we all have things on this journey that we think we're not going to do. And
Yes.
we think we're going to like, okay, I'm never going to do IVF or I'm never going to do IUI and I'm not going to.
It's true.
And then like, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to change that. So I started with him and I really do think that because of that situation, I ended up in the right hands.
Oh, that's great.
So luckily for me, like that pregnancy ended up sticking. And that fibroid eventually just sort of died off. However, I think I felt good for like 2 weeks. And then I started feeling symptoms of hyperemesis gravidarum, which is...
You mean early in the pregnancy?
Yeah. A few weeks in, I started feeling severely nauseous and,
right.
I thought, okay, well, this will pass. This is, what they tell people, like, morning sickness, but it's not morning sickness. Hyperemesis gravidarum is like, if I threw up 8 times in a day, that was a really good day.
Wow. Yeah.
And I broke all the blood vessels, in my face daily from the pressure of vomiting. And the blood vessels in my eyes were like I had bloodshot eyes and, just could not remember a time that I liked food. Like it was so awful to me. Like the idea of it, sipping water, anything. And originally,
Yeah, that's a big thing too because people get dehydrated.
yeah. Yeah. And I tried everything. I tried like, motion sickness bands and, there were lollipops that were supposed to help and ice pops and nothing. And I just didn't want anything. And that, began the insane journey of, my pregnancy because, that led me to lose about 15 pounds.
Wow.
And my doctor didn't quite realize how bad it was. And when he did, he was like, I am giving you medication that is going to stop the vomiting for a few days and you have to eat.
Yeah.
And if you do not gain weight by Monday or stay the same, I have to admit you for a feeding tube.
Wow.
So we took the weekend and, my husband was like, can you think of anything, any food you ever liked? And I was like, frozen pizza, like, like kid food. Like I went to, growing up, we had, I think it was
the simple things.
Yeah, Elio's frozen pizza, and tater tots. And I was like, I don't even know where that came from, but okay, let's try that. And the medication was so intense that you basically like you could eat and then you'd fall asleep. And so that started on a Friday and Saturday, midday, I woke up and I felt like I couldn't stop moving. Like I was very restless,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like this must be what restless leg syndrome is like, but it feels like this for my whole body.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and uh, that was crazy because I'd never experienced a situation like that before, where you feel like it's out of control. Like you can't. It kind of wreaks havoc on your mind because you don't want to keep moving, but you are.
Yeah, yeah. Was that from the medication? A side effect?
Yeah,
Oh my God, you poor thing. You got tortured.
it got worse too. 'Cause, like
Oh no.
then I got jaw lock.
Oh no.
So like my entire jaw just locked to one side. And
Oh no.
um and once that started, it didn't let go for 16 hours.
Oh my God.
And the only thing that would help is sometimes I could put all my upper body weight over my husband's shoulder and it would like kind of fall. And
Mm-hmm.
at one point in that time, it moved to the other side, but it was
Mm-hmm.
so uncomfortable and so painful. And I remember walking to use the bathroom at some point and looking at the toilet and thinking, I'd actually rather throw up than this. like,
Oh, poor thing. Oh my
like,
gosh. And was that also from the medication? Wow.
yeah. And it's interesting how your brain can only focus on one thing at a time,
Mm-hmm.
because in the back of my mind, I was like, how could I remain pregnant through all of this? Like this, my body is going through so much trauma right now. I don't know how. And I knew that my husband was thinking the same thing, but we weren't discussing it because I was so distracted by the pain and the discomfort. But I knew that he was calling the doctor and trying to find out, like, would this baby be okay?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and fortunately he got the answer that, like, yeah, this I guess what you eat doesn't always, and what medicine doesn't always go fully, like you do filter those things out to a degree. And I remember that was over the weekend, and I went back and I was able to maintain my weight, so he did not have to send me to the hospital. um, but I remember like waiting with bated breath to see that ultrasound on Monday morning. And
Yeah.
there was the baby inside with its legs crossed and an arm back, and like, yeah, I've been fine
Lounge.
in here.
That's that's amazing.
Like, I know you've been in hell, but I'm having a vacation.
I'm sure you tell the story. It's interesting because my mom actually reminded me again. You have stories that you just keep hearing over and over and over again. But truthfully, I mean, first she suffered from secondary infertility to conceive me. So I'm kind of a product of secondary infertility. And she's tried and tried and tried. And she said every time I get my period, I cry. And it was really the stories of the people that I treat. It's so crazy how that comes full circle. And I'm kind of like the proof that a woman can go through all of this and still have a baby.
Yeah.
And she also had the same thing. I don't know how severe it was, but to the point where she lost so much weight. She was under 100 pounds,
Yeah.
and her doctor said, "Listen, we got to abort this child. You're not going to survive." And she's like, "No way," And it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You go through this journey, and then you get advice that you're like, "No, no, 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 this is not happening."
Yeah. You get advice, and then also, like, you try again and
Mm-hmm.
willingly enter something this crazy. It's because the power and you know, the need and
The
your,
belief, really, right? The
yeah,
belief in that desire.
yeah, that desire to have children is pretty huge. Um, it's quite magical and wondrous, I think. Um,
I agree.
yeah, yeah,
I think it's meant to be there. Like, I don't think that it's a random thing. People feel that really strong calling, and I don't think it's random. It's not just something that was kind of planted there for no reason. I think it's because you're meant to find the baby in one way or the other. Like you were saying before about how maybe you don't expect it to be IVF, but maybe it is, and then you can kind of go back and forth. But even with egg donor or embryo donor or even adoption, I've had people talk about that, and they said I was meant to have that baby.
Yeah.
Like it was that calling. It's just that I was trying to control how it was gonna show up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really wild. I mean, the things when you listen to other people's stories, sometimes you're like, why didn't you stop? And like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, or how did you keep going? How did you persevere? And like, I follow someone online who is pregnant right now, and this is the first positive pregnancy test that she's gotten in over in 8 years of trying.
I think I saw that
So
one.
while you wait,
Yes.
yes,
It was
it was
amazing. It was
amazing.
really, oh my God, I got the chills with the video that she showed. I was like, oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, like to see that double line,
Yeah.
like
After 8 years.
yeah, that's a long time, and
Yeah.
people go through a lot, and it is not something for anyone on the outside to judge or decide or advise on, because that desire, like you said, is it's pretty wild.
It's real.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so in the end, I did get a very healthy baby. And a baby girl. We did not find out the gender. And in the middle of a contraction, my husband, we had names for both a boy and a girl. And in the middle of a contraction, my husband goes, I got to tell you something. I don't like the boy's name.
That's funny.
And I was like, I can't talk to you right now.
That is so funny.
So for that sake, we were very happy to have a girl. Like we were happy to have a girl anyway. I think we admitted to each other we really wanted a girl, but
Yeah.
like obviously we would have been over the moon for anything except that I don't know what we would have named that boy.
That's so funny.
So when she was about close to 3, I wanted some time. I was really, really enjoying just like feeling healthy and raising a baby and not rushed to have another one.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, when she like goes into preschool, then I can try to do this again. And this time I did get pregnant right away, and was pretty sick right away as well. And my doctor found this team that like sends an IV, like teaches you guys how, like you're a couple to do their own IVs. And I was set up to give myself, to put a port into my belly every morning with an IV that I wore as a pack. That was to help me to stop throwing up. And unfortunately, I feel like, anything I deal with, like there's research that comes out like a year or two later that like,
oh, wow.
that could have helped me in that situation, but unfortunately it didn't. But the medicine that was given to me at the time is no longer on the market for pregnancies because it can stop the heart from beating.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So at our 12-week ultrasound, which I was hoping to celebrate, was, and talk about like power and instinct. That morning, I felt like something was wrong.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know where that feeling came from, because it's too soon at that point to really feel anything, moving around. But I just felt like something was wrong. And I remember looking at the sky, and it was like this perfect blue, and telling myself that no matter what happens today, that sky is still going to be blue, and just to hold on to like not everything is lost. And I really don't even know why I felt this like foreboding, foreshadowing feeling. But the doctor we were waiting in the room for the doctor, and my husband was joking around, and I said, I don't know. I don't feel like joking around. And, when the doctor came in all friendly right away, I said, I feel like I was very, straightforward, in a way that I don't think I usually am. And I was right. There was no heartbeat. And I was too far along to have anything done in the office. So I had to get checked into the hospital. And, it was really, really rough and awful, because I felt like I tried so hard to do the right thing, and to keep everybody healthy. And it was awful doing the port and injecting myself every day and all of that. And it still didn't work. So we ended up naming that baby the name that I chose with my husband, but he didn't really like it. And I said, I know you didn't really like this name, but can I, use it for this baby? And in that moment, he said, yep, but why don't you give all the other names that we're not going to use next time? And that was the first time I heard him agree, oh, we'll try again.
Oh, wow.
I hadn't thought that, I guess it was it was a lot for me, but I knew I wanted to try, but I kind of felt like I said about advice that came from others, it felt like everything in the universe was saying, you have gone through enough, take your one child, be grateful, and move on. And for him to say, we will try again, it just gave me such a sense of relief that we were on the same page. But we did agree that no matter what happened, this would be the last time, because our daughter couldn't live through that again. And we couldn't, do that. So we tried again, this time with no medication, and only an IV for fluid. So it's strange. Hyperemesis is a weird thing. I definitely got it all 3 times that I was pregnant, but, with the first one and the third one, the time of day that I could eat was totally different. With the last pregnancy, I could eat something in the morning, but once 1 o'clock came, that's it. The gate was closed. There's no more putting any food or liquid into your body. So I did what I can. I did what I could to eat before that time. And we navigated it, and I had a healthy baby boy.
Oh, amazing.
So I am very, very grateful, and definitely am aware, especially when I talk to others that are in the middle of their story, that you don't know how your journey is going to end. You really don't know how you're going to get to where you get to. But I know it's so cliche, but whatever is supposed to happen, the end of the story, it works out in the end. Whether or not you get the biological child, or adoption, or foster, or 5 dogs.
Yeah.
You find peace at some point. And that
makes sense.
Yeah. My heart goes out to the people that are still in that journey and they don't have the ending yet.
Yeah, it's the ending. It's things start to make sense at the end, and then you realize had it not been for that exact moment, the genetics, all the alignment wouldn't be that exact child that you have. And obviously when you're holding that child in your hands, you're I wouldn't change this for anything. But sometimes it can be really scary, because when you're going through it, you're walking into a dark room, because you have no idea how things are going to play out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that the unknown, as we know, is the scariest things for humans.
Yeah.
Nobody likes that. It's just the unknown. And especially when it comes to such a strong desire that is so primal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so universal. I mean, it's just procreating. That's
Yep.
what we think we're wired. I mean, we are wired and we think that we're meant to do it, and
Yep.
it doesn't work out that way for everybody.
Yeah.
So in all of that, for me though, the especially in the miscarriage part, um, I felt like I didn't know who to go to, and I didn't know where to, like, I didn't feel, obviously I had at the time like a 3-year-old. And so either everyone around me in my circle at the time had a second child already or was trying to. And I don't want to go to those people in that time.
Hmm.
Um, so
Right.
I ended up calling a friend of mine who had also lost several babies at the same week,
Oh, wow.
because I needed very specific support at that time, like someone who
Yeah. Yeah.
really,
Yeah. No, that's somebody who can understand.
yeah, like understand exactly.
Yeah.
And I talked to her, and then she maybe led me to someone else, and I discovered that each woman that I spoke to um, had felt such a loss of control with their trajectory of what they had planned that they found activities that they could control to
Hmm.
um, to keep them a little bit grounded. It's such an ungrounding time, and one of them was like painting pottery, like plant pots.
Hmm.
One ran a marathon. Um, One was cooking and started to become a chef. And I
Oh, wow.
realized that there were these like stories of activities that have and you know hobbies or whatnot that came out of this. And I was like, okay, I got to find my activity. So and like I said, like something I can control, something I can seek from start to finish and have an outcome, because I
Hmm.
can't do that with a baby.
Oh, that's so interesting. This is the first time I've ever heard anybody put it in that way. I find it so interesting, and I think that is really powerful.
Yeah, I it made sense to me once I realized this common thread. I was like, oh, I get it. Um,
Hmm.
so I took up sewing and realized really quickly that is not going to be my thing. Um, it
Which
was
that
one of
happens
yeah,
too.
it was one of those things I was always curious about, and I like maybe took in eighth grade and didn't totally understand it, and so I was like, oh, I'm going to try it now, and I was like, nope, don't have any control over this either. Like, but I was writing, and I decided, well, that is something that I can do, and I really love it, and it can be an outlet for me. And so
Hmm.
I decided to, because I couldn't think about anything else, to compile these stories from people on their hurdles and their stories of trying to become a parent. And
Hmm.
that is how the book Carry On came to be. And it is stories of infertility and adoption and fostering, and most stories in the book have a happy ending, but not all the stories in the book.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of them, like when you're if you, before you get to the end of that chapter for that person, you're like, whew. But
Hmm.
every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so
Hmm.
it's been wild to interview people and learn about people. And, it because it's my book and I put it together with all these different people, I thought I was done with it a couple of years ago. And again, talk about control, and you think you're going to put a deadline on yourself, and
things change.
Yeah, it has a life of its own. But I made a fairly new friend in the last few years, and we got to know each other over something completely unrelated to fertility. And it was actually like activism for against violence for something, and like we just connected and realized like, oh, we should be friends, but we were so busy focusing on the cause that it took like a couple of months for us to get together and go for a walk before I like looked at her and said, so what do you do? Who are you? Like, and she asked the same of me, and I said, I'm working on this book. And she said, oh, if I had known you before, I probably would have been a chapter in your book.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And it took me another couple of months of getting to know her and realizing that like actually her story really does belong in this book, and it is my book. So even though it's been done for a while, I'm adding it. So her story is one of the chapters in the book, and she is the one that drew the line in the sand and said, I am never doing IVF. Like that's as far as I'll go. And if she didn't do IVF, she wouldn't have her child.
Wow. It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah. And she, and her story is really fascinating too, because like mine, her health was at risk, in order to have her child, but she, went through 20 weeks of pregnancy with twins via IVF. And unfortunately she lost those babies.
Wow.
And then, knew what to expect the next time around. But when she wanted a second child, it was just too much for her to like endure again, but it wasn't an option for her to not have a second child. So her second child is actually adopted from Ethiopia.
Oh my God. That is beautiful.
So it's a pretty amazing story.
That's amazing. That's so beautiful. I had a previous guest, Dr. Lisa Miller. She wrote The Awakened Brain.
Oh yeah.
She has an incredible story, and it was she was struggling to conceive for years with her husband. She had a voice in her head that kept saying, would you adopt if you had a child? If you were able to conceive, would you adopt? And she kept saying no. And then one day randomly they saw something on TV. I think they were either, I don't know if she was in a hospital or a hotel. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like the TV wouldn't change. And it was stuck on this channel of a child that didn't have parents. And her heart just blew wide open, and her husband as well. And they were like, that's it. We're adopting. The second they decided to adopt and they got everything in order, she conceived. And she was meant to have her adoptive child. It was like something was calling her in that direction. She kept putting it off. And then all of a sudden, boom, like in the right time, it was like, that was it. And then what happened was she heard that voice again in her mind. If you were able to conceive naturally, would you still adopt? And she said, absolutely yes. Like after she decided and saw the child, and it was just so powerful. And she was getting all kinds of crazy signs. There was a duck that left an embryo in her door. It was right after she had a challenge conceiving. And it was just, it was so crazy, like all these weird signs. And it just tells you that we're part of a very cosmic intelligence. There's got to be some kind of order that we're part of, because you can't explain that otherwise. There's something else. There's some other kind of divine intelligence.
Yeah. Whatever you want to call it, it's out there.
Yeah. Yep.
So did she end up adopting a child and having a biological child?
Yep. And she feels that her adoptive child is her child. Like that was the child she was meant to have. And then also her child. And they were also meant to be together. It's amazing. It's just so wild on so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah. I just met someone. I did a panel for a fertility expo, and the woman sitting next to me had dealt with secondary infertility and had no issue getting pregnant with her first child. And then her second child, just she could not get pregnant. And they had been on a list for fostering kids. And I didn't go, like, she wasn't ever planning to adopt, but just to help other people and to take in another child. And she was thinking she was going to get like a teenager. And somehow they were called randomly like 2 years ago with a newborn that was available. And so she has raised that, baby since birth, and now is trying to adopt the baby. And of course, 2 year, a year and a half into having that baby, she did get pregnant and now has 3 children.
Oh, wow. You just don't know how. And that's the part of relinquishing control. Like, we know we have the desire, and the desire is there for a reason. We almost have to rely on that divine intelligence for the how.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's what it is. And when we fight that, that's where I feel like it doesn't stop like you from having it eventually, but it stops the process. It delays it. I think when we fight that divine intelligence, that flow that's trying to move you in a certain direction.
Yeah, it's really true. It's and also, like, I don't know why I keep coming back to this today, but that, middle of the middle part of the story, like, you have to find a way to be uncomfortable in that disequilibrium, and manage it, because it's not going to stay like that. It won't.
Right.
Like,
this too shall pass.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like in every situation, like this week, my daughter was expecting to get, she had worked really, really hard for a slot and an opportunity to do something. And they were looking at 10 people and knocking it down to 6. And she ended up in the bottom 4 and did not get that opportunity. And I'm shocked. She's shocked. She's devastated. And as a parent, you have that, like, you don't really want to be more upset for them. Like, there's a fine line. You got to balance, like, your own emotions before you, and I just, like, the last couple of days I've been like, okay, what's going to happen next? Because somehow something is going to make this better. Like, and I know something will happen, like, but I feel like I'm on the edge of my seat, sort of waiting for news.
Yeah.
And that is familiar to me, for, like, all the waiting and the waiting and the waiting of, like, well, what's going to happen? Something is going to happen. Something exciting at some point. And you might have some pretty upsetting moments along the way, but something is going to happen.
Yes, I actually remember hearing, I don't remember where it was, but it was a rabbi who said that there was, like, a saying that everything in the end works out. And if it's not working out, or everything in the end is good, and if it's not good, it's not the end. Yeah. And I'm like, I love that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I definitely feel that way. But we get, like, it's so global. It's so, like, whatever your politics are, you can feel like, oh, shoot, that happened, like, we feel this universally, like, many, many times. And it shifts, things shift.
They do.
And then, and the story ends.
Yes. Yeah. Things definitely shift. And I'm also kind of into Kabbalah right now, like, because it's very similar to quantum physics. And I love that, how Joe Dispenza talks about that. But I find that a lot of, like, ancient traditions teach about, and these are things that aren't necessarily, you don't need to see them as like a religion per se. It's actually a way of life. It's almost like a science of life. And they talk about how when things do come up, it is really for your soul to evolve. And sometimes those difficult things, like, the second we react to them, then we sort of block ourselves off from the light and that like wisdom. But when we allow them, and this is, they talked about it in Zen Buddhism, that's truly going with the flows. Like even when things are not comfortable, if you just allow for it to move and don't fight it with the non-resistance, then it actually helps to grow your soul or your spirit, your personality, your mind, your ability to handle things. Like it's pretty wild, but in some senses that challenge is what helps us. And the same thing if you look at a butterfly or even like a plant coming out of a seed and that hard shell and that fighting and that challenge of trying to get through, so it's painful, but they do it. And that aspect of it, the difficulty, the challenge is really what helps us to become more of ourselves.
Yeah, to get to the other side.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But like you said, it's universal. It could be applied to anything in your life.
Yeah.
It could be applied to anything, to getting a job, to marrying the right partner. And it's very similar. And also just any kind of challenges that happen in your life.
Yeah.
And I've seen it so many times, just like you, like so many stories of people that had they looked at their history and said, okay, well, since I've never gotten pregnant before, like the one we just spoke about, 8 years of never getting pregnant, you could look at the history and say, oh, based on the history, and since it's been so long, that's going to probably be my future. And logically, it makes sense to think like that, but it's not necessarily the case for many people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that belief of holding and hope is like, that's such a challenging topic because it is the first thing to go, I think, when you're challenged and faced with a big hurdle to overcome. It's hard to like think you can hold on to any sort of hope, but that's pretty much the key.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting that it's so hard because the journey by itself, you're also faced with a lot of professionals that are giving you stats and numbers. And sometimes when you go into that's like a hope killer. It'll immediately say, well, I guess you can't really do it because look at your numbers are terrible. And based on this, it's just not possible for you. And so many people still conceive despite that and have healthy children, births. So it's interesting how also the fertility journey just happens to be one that you're faced with a lot of hope killers in general. And so having to really stay grounded and really stay close to that desire and keep that like in your heart is very challenging. And you mentioned something that was actually really powerful. And I think that is something that everybody should be given as a resource is just community, connecting with people that know exactly what you're going through. And having that support is tremendous. And it's just nowadays it's getting better than it used to. I feel like it used to be worse. Now we have social media, we have lots of groups, we're connecting. And I think that that's huge. And I think that people who go through miscarriages, doctors should be required to give them resources.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with a traumatic event and then you're sent home. And I think that is not right. It's like unethical to not provide support for people going through that.
I agree. And I think that is a big flaw in our medical community, like our medical world. It takes, I don't want to be, put anybody in boxes, but the majority of the people who become doctors are very cerebral and understand the logistics of the physical body and don't always necessarily take into account the emotional side. Mm-hmm. I would say most, for me, of the doctors that I have seen don't handle the emotional stuff very well. And I think we're learning that, mental health is such a massive, massive element that cannot be ignored and needs the attention. And I do think when you said it's getting better community wise, it is, but from what it there, hundreds of years ago and in other countries still today, community is everything surrounding
Yeah, this is
people.
true.
And
Yeah.
I would say Western medicine has, you know, unfortunately kind of cut that out. And like even in other countries, I think it's France where once you have a baby, you're provided with physical therapy for the woman who gave, for you as a woman, you're given attention to heal yourself. And here we're sent home. You just had a baby. Bye. You're good. Not even
Yeah.
24
Yeah.
hours of any instruction. If you adopt a baby, you have to go through many, many, many hours of training. But on the other side, if you you just birthed your own baby, you're sent home. Good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say lack of community is still huge. And yes, you can find that online, but
Right. It's not the same as actually having a physical community.
yeah, and we still don't provide that for each other. And there's no wonder to me why doulas and midwives and lactation consultants and postpartum doulas are in such high demand. And unfortunately, that's a luxury.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a luxury and it's expensive. Not everybody can afford it.
Yeah, but I understand the need for it. It makes perfect sense to me. Because it's like we're thrown into this dark tunnel without any, light provided. It would be nice for someone to sit by your side and tell you how it's going to go. And yes, mothers and sisters can, and friends can do that to an extent, but yeah, it feels like there's a need. And yes, you can Google anything and you will find out.
It's not quite the same. Actually, if anything, it gives you more anxiety.
Yeah.
It's so important. And I think that it's true. Like I as you're talking, I'm like, this is basically the building blocks of society. Like if you have a good foundation that's done with love and wisdom and carries on like traditions and history that people have learned from and can teach it. I mean, it feels like almost like there's a gap because it used to be that way really back in the day. And then there's this gap with the industrial age and we've sort of gotten more separated. And now we're thirsting for it. And there is a very big demand for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that not that a book can cover that, but I feel like the aspect of why I chose to write this is just if it could help one person not feel as alone as I felt before I started finding these people. That's the goal. Cause, I think even people who can find access to other people sometimes are afraid to like make that like leap to go find a support group or talk to other people. Like, I have a friend right now, a very close friend dealing with cancer, and she has 3 kids.
I'm sorry to hear that.
There are so many groups available to them to speak to others who are dealing exactly with what they're dealing with, but they don't want to go.
It's so personal.
Yeah. So I whatever way someone can find that community, whether it's through a podcast or a group in the park or a Facebook group or or in a book, I just I hope for people that they find people to connect to so they don't feel alone.
Yeah. I love that you wrote this book. I think having stories is so powerful, and just knowing these true stories and that people went through them, and then you can relate to the challenges, and then you can see how it ends for some people. I think that it's so powerful not to feel alone. I think that that's the big key, is just not feeling alone. And like you said, the key is hope. So for people who are listening to this, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be wanting to look at this book right now. How can they find the book? How can they find out more about you?
My website is shaybartandrioni.com. And the book is available on Amazon. It's also available in certain bookstores. You can walk into your local bookstore and order it through them if they don't have it. And the book is called Carry On, and the subtitle is True Stories of the Heartbreak and Wonder of Trying to Start a Family.
Well, first of all, I really enjoyed this conversation with you today, Shay. This is really so heartfelt, and it was so symbolic of like the power of the human spirit and going through that, and just everything that you shared today and opening up. And I really appreciate you coming on. I really, really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was nice to meet you.
Same. And also, just for the listeners, if you guys want, all of the links that Shay just mentioned are going to be in the episode notes. So you don't have to memorize everything that you just heard. You could just go back to the episode notes. So thank you so much for coming on today, Shay.
You're most welcome.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.